Hey there, and happy wedding planning. We are here today to talk about transportation for you, for your wedding party, and for your guests. First thing is that there are a million different options. I mean, every wedding is different, and that's what I love about this industry. You might be at a all-in-one location where your ceremony and your reception and maybe even your hotels are all on site. You may be having a separate ceremony in perhaps a church or on private property and then moving to a different reception location. You might be having guests stay off-site, on-site. They may all live in the city. You have a million different options. So nothing that I say is going to be a one size fits all. I'm just going to try and give you some options for different scenarios that we see often, and to try and help you plan for what your wedding might look like within those boundaries. And then, of course, I'm always more than happy to chat if you have a different scenario and you're not quite sure how to deal with it. So let's first talk about you and your wedding party. The timing of your day is going to dramatically affect who goes where and when they go. If you're doing a first look, it's likely going to be you and your partner who need to be at a specific location at a specific time. If you're doing a more traditional, maybe church ceremony or a ceremony, regardless of location, where you and your partner don't see each other before the ceremony, then you're a little bit less restricted in terms of getting just you and your partner to a location, where you can maybe just get the whole wedding party to a location if there's no first look. So again, myriad different options here that you are going to have to plan for depending on your specific timeline for your wedding day. If you are doing a first look, I would really strongly recommend actually that you don't have your wedding party or your families there. If they are there because everybody's on site because they're getting ready at the first look location, for instance, then maybe just respectfully communicate with them that that's a private moment for you and your partner and you'd like them not to be onlookers. If you do need to travel to a first look location, it's probably easiest and cheapest, depending on whether that's a concern, to just have someone drive you and your partner to that first look location. If, though, it makes more sense to get your entire wedding party to a first look location that is then also going to be a ceremony location, and you're looking at more of a large scale transportation option, maybe you're looking at a bus or a limo, then it's pretty common to have one side of the party transported separately from the other side of the party. So let's say if you have a groom and groomsmen, that maybe they arrive there first, that's a great opportunity for a photographer or videographer to do, getting ready photos or sort of photos of that side of the party prior to the other side of the party arriving. So you've transported one side of the party, then the limo or the bus or the vehicle goes back to pick up the other side of the party, and then you do a first look, and then maybe you segue into wedding party photos. So again, that's not a one size fits all. It very much depends on your wedding party and the locations of your ceremony and reception. But if the venue is all in one, that's amazing. It really limits the transportation that you need. If you're getting married at a hotel and you're also getting ready at that hotel, that's awesome. There's no transportation needed. You can do your first look. You can have your wedding party come in for photos when they're needed. That's amazing. Now, in terms of kinds of transportation, there are limitless options. I mean, you could come in a helicopter if you'd like to, if that's in your budget. Wicked. Please give me a call. I would love to plan that wedding. But common options for most guests and couples and wedding parties would be a limo or a party bus, perhaps a school bus. There are sedan services out there that have larger vehicles like Yukons that you can book. There are, of course, vintage cars if you're interested in smaller scale transportation for just you and your partner. You could rent vehicles. Of course, then you need to have someone to drive those vehicles and to ideally remain sober and safe to drive those vehicles. You could pre-book or call on the spot Ubers or cabs. If you are investigating that option, I would strongly recommend pre-booking and following up to ensure that that vehicle will actually show up at the time and on the date recommended and requested. You could hire a designated driver service. One of the ones locally that we have here is Driver's Seat or Keys Thanks. And you could, of course, always drive yourselves as well. If you're driving yourselves, my caveat would be that you need to plan out who is driving prior to the day of so that that person can be prepared. Ideally, that vehicle can be cleaned, especially if there is a white dress getting into that vehicle. You'll want to make sure that the vehicle has been detailed and pay special attention to the door jambs, because those are the areas that tend to attract grease that ultimately will transfer to a wedding dress. If you have any member of your wedding party driving, you just want to make sure that their vehicle is prepared, that there's no dog hair in the back seat that's going to transfer to a suit. You know what I'm saying. Now, for guest transportation, if you are providing that, there are some things to think about. One, if there's a recommended hotel or a hotel where you have a room block, it's very convenient because then the transportation can depart from that location. Otherwise, you might need to think about creating a central spot, maybe a hotel again, where guests can park their cars and then take that transportation to your wedding, which may be maybe at a remote location, and then they can take the transportation back to the central location where their car is. You could also, if you have most of your guests staying at a hotel, obviously they'll park their cars there. They go to the ceremony, to the reception, and then back. Easy peasy. If you have guests who are departing from a central location, you could use, like I said, a hotel. You could use a mall or a business area where there's lots of parking. But just be considerate of your guests in that if you get them from that central location to your wedding and back again, they still have to get from that central location back to their homes. And if they've been drinking and it's late at night, how are they going to do that safely? So these are all things that you need to think about if you are coordinating any kind of guest transportation at all. In terms of vehicle options, of course, you have the limo or the party bus. That's going to be probably your most expensive option. You could do a school bus. You could call a cab company and provide your guests with what are called chits. That's chits with a CH, not an SH. And what that means is that you essentially give like a voucher for a cab ride home. You could ask a friend or a parent's friend or a cousin who's not invited to the wedding to drive back and forth in a larger vehicle. You could have any kind of shuttle service from a hotel if they offer that. That's perhaps an option. But you'll need to consider whether, if it's a larger vehicle, you're going to do scheduled departure times. For instance, you have an early departure at 10 and then a later one at midnight and then perhaps one at 1:30 to wrap up the night, or whether it's a smaller vehicle and they're just going to do a round trip. If they're doing a round trip, are they just going from the wedding location to a hotel, or are they going to take requests and drop people to their homes? What's the radius that that car service is going to serve? How are they going to maintain efficiency for the guests who might be waiting for another trip? If a car service is driving a guest to their home and it's half an hour out and half an hour back, that means it's an hour for the next guest who's waiting for that service before they can get a ride. You might want to consider having guests RSVP for transportation if you are going to provide that for them, especially if you're providing, for instance, a bus from a hotel to the wedding site. I have had experiences where couples anticipated that there would be 60 guests taking a bus. They booked 2 buses, and ultimately very few of those guests showed up, and they needed less than half of one bus, but had already paid for 2. So you may want to consider having guests RSVP. That gets into a bit of a micromanagement issue where you need to determine how much information is too much information, and you don't want to be individually coordinating transportation for all of your guests. So if you are providing group transportation and you'd like to have an RSVP, I would suggest that's a situation where you're leaving from a hotel, you are going to the ceremony, you need to know how many guests will take advantage of that, period, and stop, full stop. You don't want to get into all kinds of details about who needs to go where and when, and they want an individual ride back to their homes. Ultimately, you need to consider that your guests are adults and they should be responsible for themselves. Any transportation that you're providing is just a courtesy. Other things to think about will include the cost. Is it in your budget ultimately to provide guests a safe ride home? Think about always traffic, especially if you're getting married on a Saturday in the middle of a busy season. What's the traffic downtown going to look like? What limitations might that put, or what restrictions might that create for your transportation from home to ceremony or from hotel to ceremony? Is it going to add extra time? Always allow extra time, regardless. Accessibility. Do you have a vehicle booked that is going to allow for people with formal dresses on, with people with mobility issues? Think about also air conditioning. If you're booking a school bus, it is the most affordable way to transport a lot of guests in a short period of time with a budget in mind, but often they don't have air conditioning. If you're getting married in peak summer months, it's going to be warm. It's also impossible if you're scheduling shuttles at the end of the night to predict who's going to leave early. You might schedule a 10 o'clock shuttle and a 12 o'clock and a 1 o'clock, and that 10 o'clock shuttle might sit there unused. So those are things that you will want to consider, because if you book a 10 o'clock and nobody takes it, you do still have to pay for that 10 o'clock. Ultimately, again, there is no magic bullet here. You need to analyze what's best for your guests, the demographic, the location of your wedding, the budget that you've allocated, and really the services you want to provide to your guests. Because again, ultimately, they are adults and they will be able to figure it out for themselves if you do not provide transportation for them. Wedding party wise, that's a different story. You do need to make sure that your bridesmaids and groomsmen can get to places when they need to be there. So thinking about where you're getting ready and how you'll transport that wedding party to a ceremony and to a reception are definitely things to consider. Make sure that you have a large enough vehicle. Make sure that that vehicle is reliable. And as always, think about flow on the day. Will your wedding party be able to get to where they need to go in a vehicle that transports all of them in a timely fashion? As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to chat about any of this. Wishing you happy planning and a smooth wedding day where everybody gets to where they need to go when they need to be there.